I'd like to ask, Brother Shahid, you heard us speaking about Article 6. You are aware of the violations. I mean, you started this campaign, you called for this campaign, and you were the one that said enough is enough. Is there anything that you would like to add at this point in time before we move on to the next topic?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. Thanks everyone for joining, and all of the wonderful speakers that we have, mashallah. And everyone who's joining the live to listen and educate yourself about this issue. First of all, I just want to say that, as always, you're covering everything that needs to be covered, mashallah. I would just say, I've seen some people in the comments talking about Trump. Someone asked whether or not we were calling for the invocation of Article 6 because, or rather in anticipation of a Trump presidency. Rather, we're calling for the invocation of Article 6 because of 80 years of violations committed by every single U.S. president that there has been since the founding of the United Nations. There isn't a difference between any single one of them in terms of whether or not they're war criminals who have committed crimes against humanity. And there's no difference between any of them with regards to their domination of the United Nations and their misuse and abuse of the United Nations as a tool for guaranteeing themselves impunity for the commission of war crimes and crimes against humanity. That's every single U.S. president that you've had over there since 1945, and obviously prior to 1945, but we're just concerned right now with the period covering, or the period spanned by the existence of the United Nations. But I would say that we just had from President-elect Trump a very informative display of America's intent to commit violations of the UN Charter. So it's not just that they have persistently violated the principles of the United Nations Charter, but they have every intention to continue doing so. Trump had his press conference a couple of days back, and everyone has been talking about it ever since then, where Trump is talking about economically destroying Canada to coerce Canada into becoming an American colony, i.e. a state by force, colonizing Canada, and he's talking about even potentially using military force against Greenland to take control over Greenland, and also Panama, the Panama Canal, talking about we're going to take the Panama Canal back, and also not ruling out using military force to do that. He's not ruling out military force or economic force for Panama and for Greenland, and he's not ruling out economic force. In fact, he said explicitly using economic force against Canada. Well, these three intentions that Trump was asked about, and the fact that he was even asked about it, he was asked by a reporter, would you rule out using coercive military force or economic force against Canada or against Greenland? And he said against Greenland, no. But the very fact that you have to ask an incoming president, do you have the intention, or can you guarantee us that you will not violate the United Nations Charter? Why do you have to ask that, except that you have an expectation that the president is a criminal? You have an expectation, and you have that, and that expectation is based upon 8 decades of violations. It's based upon 8 decades of crimes committed by U.S. presidents, committed by the United States of America against the rest of the world. The only difference now is that it has expanded to where they're not only going to be committing crimes in the global south, which is what they have always done historically. Now they're even talking about committing crimes in the global north, committing crimes against their own allies, committing crimes against the EU, committing crimes against Canada, because the United Nations Charter specifically and explicitly forbids and prohibits any country from using economic coercion or from using military force against any other country to try to interfere with and intrude upon and control their domestic politics. That's illegal. That's an international crime. It's against the United Nations Charter. And we just had President-elect Trump explicitly stating that he has every intention to do that. He has every intention to violate the United Nations Charter. So this just shows that we have a continuing pattern of habitual behavior by the United States that will never be corrected without punishment. You can never get someone to correct their abusive behavior, their violent behavior. You'll never get them to change as long as they have impunity, as long as there's unaccountability. You will never get them to change. That's the whole purpose of the United Nations, is exactly for that reason, to hold nations accountable for when they violate international law. But here we have the United Nations being dominated by one country that is the biggest violator of international law, the most habitual violator of international law. It's so habitual, it's so persistent in its violation of international law that they just state explicitly that they intend to do it. It's so normalized for the United States to commit crimes against other countries, to interfere in the politics of other countries, to intrude upon the politics of other countries, to exert coercion militarily and economically and politically and in every other kind of way, to exert coercion against every other country and any other country that they choose. You just had Elon Musk a few months back talking about Venezuela and saying we'll coup anyone we want. We'll overthrow any government we want. This is an outlaw country, and it has been only ever run by outlaws since the founding of the United Nations. There's not a difference between Trump and Biden, and between Biden and Obama, and between Obama, Clinton, or Bush. All of them, down the line from 1945 until now, they've all been war criminals. They've all committed crimes against humanity, every single one of them. And it's to such an extent that it's been normalized to them, to such an extent that they can talk about it openly, that they have every intention to do it, that they have every intention and feel entitled to violate international law, to the point even that the population themselves and reporters, so-called journalists themselves can ask, can you guarantee us that you're not going to violate the law? This is the question that you have to ask. It's not an assumption that anyone can make that an American president is going to follow international law, because the concept of American exceptionalism, the translation of that term is outlawism. America has the right to be an outlaw. They have a right to be above the law. That's what they have proven, and that's the way that they have behaved. And like I said, the only way that you can ever change that kind of negative, destructive, violent, abusive behavior is by consequences, is by accountability, is by suspending their impunity. Because I've mentioned this before, that what everyone has to understand, that America's hegemony as a so-called global superpower, it isn't because of their power. It isn't because of their military power. It isn't because of their economic power, which have both been in decline, relative decline, for decades, to where now they don't have purchasing power of China. China is already a bigger economy than the United States. Militarily, China spends at least as much money on their military as the United States does. If you subtract from the U.S. Defense budget all of the wasted money and all of the overcharging that the military contractors do, if you subtract all of the waste, then America's actual military budget is below that of China. And in terms of military personnel, they're not even in the running in terms of how many people that they actually have who are active soldiers. So no, their actual power is not what has enabled them to dominate the globe. What has enabled them to dominate the globe is their impunity, and they have secured that impunity for themselves by their domination of the United Nations. You see, by gathering all of the countries of the world, by corralling all of the countries of the world into the General Assembly, and then putting themselves on top of the General Assembly at the Security Council and giving themselves the veto power, they're able to actually dominate the world. It's not by actually physically dominating the world, and it's not even by economically dominating the world. They don't actually have that kind of power in real life. They don't actually have that kind of power. They do it through the leverage that they get by their domination of the UN. But the good news is that they can be expelled from the United Nations. I saw someone else in the comments saying, we need a new United Nations. Well, a new United Nations is exactly what we're pursuing. Because if you can expel the United States from the United Nations, well, you will have revived and renewed the United Nations and made it a new organization. And it will be an organization that we haven't seen an organization like what the United Nations can be. We've never seen it actually operate in the world because it's been dominated by the US since 1945. So once we expel the US from the UN, then we'll be able to see the United Nations actually operate the way it's supposed to, according to what it says on paper. We'll see a United Nations that actually operates according to global consensus. And we'll see a United Nations that can actually take international law seriously, and it can actually enforce international law seriously and equally against anyone and everyone who violates international law. And you can't even begin to make a move on that. And the question was asked earlier, Sister Nisa asked Brother Ali about the impact on global perspectives or perceptions of morality, of justice, and so forth, and how that has been undermined by America's domination of the United Nations. You know that feeling that you have in your chest and the doubt that you have in your mind that it's even something that can happen. This is all you need to know about the demoralizing impact, the humiliating and degrading impact that it has had on the world for America to dominate the United Nations, that no one even takes international law seriously, because all we know is that so-called international law is very, very selectively enforced. It has historically been only enforced against America's enemies or America's victims. It's never, ever been enforced against the United States, ever. It has never been enforced against the United States. And the United States is the chief violator of international law. So that has made everyone in the world cynical and pessimistic about international law. That's why we have this movement. And you have to understand also that when we're asking you to sign the petition, no one who is involved in this campaign believes for a second that the petition in and of itself is going to achieve our aim. It's not like we can take the petition to the General Assembly and give it to the United Nations, and then by means of the petition, get the United States expelled from the UN. No, we want you to sign the petition because we want to be able to show that there is international, global, grassroots support for the invocation of Article 6 against the United States, so that we can take that global grassroots support when we elevate our campaign to the political and diplomatic level, and we're able to approach member states of the UN and show them that at least 100,000 people in the world support this. At least 100,000 people from all around the world support the invocation of Article 6. And supporting the invocation of Article 6 doesn't mean anything except that you support international law. You support accountability for every nation, and that no nation should be above the law. So if you believe in that principle, if you believe in that ideal, then you should sign the petition and then be part of this movement, be part of this campaign, so that then we can show governments around the world, we can show member states around the world, most of whom, if not all of whom, have been to one degree or another, at one time or another, a victim of American domination of the UN, a victim of American coercion, just like now their very own neighbor to the north is looking at being a victim of their coercion. And Greenland is looking at being a victim of their coercion. And Panama, again, is going to be a victim of their coercion. So we need the grassroots support. We need to be able to show member states that we have this kind of support from the regular people, from the global population, to give them the confidence to raise this issue. Because once the issue is raised, well, it's just a matter of protocol. It's just a matter of procedure. Because once it's raised at the UN, then it will go to the Security Council, and then from the Security Council, it will go to the General Assembly. And if we just get 2/3 majority at the General Assembly to vote for Article 6 against the US, well, the US will be expelled. It's just procedural. And it's not going to be difficult, believe me, to get a 2/3 majority at the General Assembly. Well, I think that if you held the vote today at the General Assembly, you would see the closest thing that you've ever seen at the United Nations to a unanimous vote to invoke Article 6 against the United States. So that's what I wanted to say, just to explain what the campaign is overall and the reasons for it, as you all have been doing much better than me. And I want to ask everyone who's listening and who's following us here, please go to the link that's in my bio. It's in the Middle Nation bio, and I think in the bios of everyone who's a speaker on the panel. Please go sign the petition and share, it's going to ask you to donate. You don't have to do that. If you do donate, it just goes to change.org. It doesn't go to us. We're not asking for any money. You can opt out of the contribution option and just maybe share it. So please go and sign it and share it with your family and friends, and talk to. And if you're involved in any sort of activism, or if you're involved in any sort of protests or rallies, demonstrations or marches or what have you for Gaza, please share this campaign with them. Because if you're calling for a ceasefire, for example, if you're calling for a Palestinian state, if you're calling for accountability for Israel, well, your slogans and your chants and your calls should immediately be followed by calling for the invocation of Article 6, because nothing that you're going to be calling for in any street protest, in any march, in any demonstration, nothing that you're going to be calling for in terms of accountability for Israel and in terms of securing the rights of the Palestinians, nothing that you're going to be calling for is going to be heard, is going to resonate, is going to have any impact whatsoever, unless there is an or else that follows it up. You have to follow it up with a practical action. And this is the most practical action for securing the rights of the Palestinians and for ending the impunity of the Zionist genociders. This is the most practical action that you can take. As Sister Haya was saying, the genocide that's being committed in Gaza, I'm sorry, I know I'm not supposed to use the actual words, but I can't help it. I'm from that generation. The genocide that's being committed in Gaza, it's an American genocide. Short and simple. You can't fool us by having your client having just the Jewish brigade of American imperialism committing a genocide and say that you have nothing to do with it and just wash your hands of it. No, it's your genocide. They're your bombs. They're your planes. They're your helicopters. Those are your missiles. Those are your drones. You're the ones who's committing the genocide. And then when Israel does get in trouble for doing what you want them to do, then you cover for them at the United Nations. So the only way that you can hold Israel accountable is by holding America accountable, because as Sister Haya said, they're one and the same entity. They're one and the same entity. Israel is nothing but American policy in the Middle East. That's all it is. It's not even its own entity. To even call it a state is a joke. It's a policy of the United States. It's a colony. It's a colonial project, just as Sister Haya said. And the only way to stop it, the only way to hold it accountable is to hold America accountable. If you can get America expelled from the United Nations, well, you've already solved your Israel problem. Because Israel can't stand up against the global consensus, because the global consensus is and always has been against them. Is and always has been for the establishment of a Palestinian state. In fact, they're not even supposed to have a state. According to the United Nations, the very same ruling that gave them a state also required the establishment of a Palestinian state. So they've been in violation of international law. They've been in violation of the United Nations ever since they were established as a so-called state. And the only way that you can hold Israel and the Zionists accountable is by holding America accountable. So please, again, I'll just repeat it. Go to the link in my bio and in the bio of, I think, almost everyone here. I'm not sure if Brother Ali is able to have it in his bio yet, but in the Middle Nation account bio, go to the link, sign the petition, and share it with your family and friends. And inshallah, we will see this accomplished, inshallah, bi'idhnillah. I would just say, for Americans, Brother Ali was talking about the violations that America commits against its own citizens, which are multiple. But they keep you ignorant about the fact that your rights under international law are being violated on a daily basis. They keep you ignorant about that fact because they have duped you into believing in American exceptionalism. And that makes you feel special. But it's the kind of special of being in a special prison cell. It's the specialness of being in an isolation cell and being solitary confinement. That's the kind of special that you have in terms of American exceptionalism if you're an average American citizen, meaning that you don't have recourse to international law when you should. Your rights are being violated in that country. But with regards to the consequences on the American people and on America as a nation, when, inshallah, bi'idhnillah, when they get expelled from the UN, well, as I said, once they get expelled from the UN, then the UN will have the power to actually penalize them and punish them for their 80 years of violations, which would probably include economic sanctions. So you would have two things happening. One is that the American economy would be under sanction by 193 other member states, including their allies, including their trading partners, including China, including Europe, and including all of the countries of the global south, all of their major trading partners. Now, 25% of the American economy is based on international trade. So that's going to hurt the American economy severely. But as Brother Ali, you have to understand how the American economy works. And this is what Brother Ali was talking about, which is that the driver of the American economy has historically been the military-industrial complex. And that has depended upon America's impunity that they secured through their domination of the United Nations, allowing them to create, to foment, and to propagate and perpetuate conflicts all around the world, to pour money into the military-industrial complex. Well, whose money is that? That's your money. That's taxpayer money. So while the economy might suffer, while the economy would undoubtedly suffer as a result of international sanctions against the United States, while the economy would undoubtedly suffer, you would have the benefit of of the U.S. no longer being able to funnel your tax dollars into Raytheon, into Lockheed Martin, into General Dynamics, and so forth, into lining the pockets of the defense sector, the aerodynamics sector, and so forth. That they would no longer be able to do that because there wouldn't be any money in it anymore, because there's only money in it now because they have the impunity that they've secured through their domination of the UN, which allows them to create these conflicts all around the world. So if you're not able now to create conflicts all around the world without being punished by the United Nations, if you're not able to create all of these conflicts around the world, well, there's no money in the weapons anymore. There's no money in the killing economy anymore. So now your tax dollars are going to have to go somewhere else. That means that your tax dollars might actually start going to you. They might actually start being spent on you. They might be spent on social welfare. They might be spent on infrastructure. They might be spent on hospitals, on clinics, on schools, on education. You might get everything that you might lose in terms of the economy, everything that you might lose because of the sanctions, well, you'll gain it back by your own tax dollars. You'll have the ability and you'll have the power to gain all of that back by your own tax dollars. You won't be struggling anymore. You won't have to worry, just like Brother Ali was talking about every time the phone rings, it's a bill collector, and you have your social security number around your neck like an iron collar, like it's your criminal record that they have to check on you every time you want to do anything in the United States. If you want to buy a car, you want to rent a car, you want to rent an apartment, you want to do anything, they do a check on you like you have a criminal history. Well, that won't happen anymore. You'll be able to actually change your whole country. You'll be able to change the whole culture of your country, the whole culture of your economy. You'll be able to change everything. You know, there's people who always talk about, and I don't blame you for talking about, because you feel guilty about the fact that your tax dollars are being spent to murder babies in Gaza. So you don't want any part of it. So you think about having some sort of a tax protest, that you don't want to pay your taxes, withhold your taxes, or this, that, the other. Okay, that's a solution or a strategy that doesn't go to the root of the problem. The root of the problem is the fact that it's even profitable for them to take your tax dollars and fund the military-industrial complex with it. And that the only reason that that's a profitable endeavor is because they dominate the United Nations, which allows them to foment and perpetuate conflicts around the world. So if you really want to solve the problem can be solved by invoking Article 6 and expelling the U.S. from the UN, removing the impunity from them and holding them accountable. You'll be able to transform your whole economy. You'll transform your whole country. Like I said, the whole culture of your country can be changed. And the daily lives of American citizens who are struggling now, wallahi, I know they are. I know that the majority of American citizens are living paycheck to paycheck, and you're worried about whether you can spend money on this or money on that, on a necessity, or on this other necessity, and you have to choose which necessity is the most necessary. So I know that the people in America are struggling. I know that they're suffering. And you have to understand, and you have to be able to identify what's the cause of that. What's the real source of that problem? The real source of that problem is that your country has been allowed to build its economy on death and murder and carnage and killing and war. They've been allowed to do that. And you feel bad about it. I know you do. You feel guilty about that. I know you do. There are people I know that you see them online, and I've talked to them myself, who can't sleep at night because they know that their tax money is going to murder babies and murder women and murder children and murder innocent people in Gaza. And they can't live with it from how guilty they feel about what their tax dollars are going for. And the only thing that they can think of is to try to maybe find some kind of way to withhold their taxes. But that's not solving the problem, because you still have this military industrial complex where the entire economy is based on killing. The entire economy is based on murder, on destruction. And you need to solve that problem. And the way that you solve that problem is by removing America's impunity and their unaccountability and their license and their entitlement to sow destruction all around the globe. That's what you have to solve. And you solve that problem by kicking the United States out of the United Nations. And then the United Nations can hold them accountable and can punish that country and punish their economy for what they've done, which will take the money, your tax money, will take that tax money out of the pockets of the military industrial complex. It will take it out of the pockets of Raytheon, out of the pockets of General Dynamics, out of the pockets of Lockheed Martin, and put it back into your life, put it back into your necessities, put it back into your pockets. That's the real solution to this problem. So it's not only are you going to be helping the people in Gaza, not only are you going to be helping the people in the global south, not only are you going to be helping all of the global victims of the United States, you're going to be helping your own self. You're going to be stopping your own victimization by your own government. And you'll be able to transform your own country into the kind of country that you really want it to be. Thanks very much.